When Russia invaded Ukraine in early 2022, the assumption was simple. This would be fast, decisive, over before the world could even process it. Russian forces would overwhelm Ukrainian defenses. Kiev would fall. The West would protest, sanction, then slowly move on. That was the plan. Instead, the war dragged on, then it hardened, then it began consuming Russia itself. Now, in 2026, the conflict has entered a phase that Moscow never prepared for. Not a dramatic collapse, not a single catastrophic defeat, something far more dangerous: exhaustion. Russia is no longer fighting to win quickly. It is fighting to avoid stopping, and those are very different wars. Because modern wars do not usually end when one side is defeated on the battlefield. They end when one side can no longer afford to keep fighting at the same pace, and that moment is getting closer. Western officials have started saying it out loud. NATO leadership has warned that Russia is running out of resources, manpower, and viable ideas. But this is not just political messaging. The warning signs are visible across the battlefield, the economy, and inside Russia's own decision-making. What makes 2026 different is not one new weapon or one sudden collapse. It is convergence, multiple long-running problems reaching their limits at the same time. Russia is not about to implode tomorrow, but the structure holding this war together is thinning. And once that structure fails, it fails quickly. To understand why, you have to look past daily headlines and focus on systems, equipment, production, people, money, and the pace at which Russia is burning through all of them. This story begins with the foundation of Russian military power: mass. Russia entered this war with one of the largest stockpiles of military equipment on Earth. Thousands of tanks, tens of thousands of armored vehicles, artillery systems stretching back to the Soviet era. On paper, it looked overwhelming. For decades, Russia relied on a simple assumption: quantity could compensate for almost anything. Older equipment could be stored, refurbished, reactivated when needed. Losses could be absorbed because the reserves were deep. That assumption is now breaking. Independent tracking of visually confirmed losses shows Russia has already lost tens of thousands of pieces of military equipment, thousands of tanks, thousands more armored vehicles, and these are only the losses that can be verified through imagery and footage. The real numbers are almost certainly higher. What matters more than the raw number is which equipment is being lost. Russia began the war with a finite number of modern tanks, upgraded T-72 variants, T-80 series, T-90 platforms. Those tanks are now being destroyed faster than they can be replaced. Production helps, but not enough. Even at maximum output, Russian industry cannot manufacture modern tanks at a rate that matches battlefield losses, and refurbishment is no longer the safety net it once was. Early in the war, Russia pulled the best preserved vehicles out of storage first. Tanks that had been maintained, protected, ready to return to service with minimal work. By 2025, that pool had dried up. What remains in storage is older, more degraded, missing components, vehicles that require extensive labor and scarce parts just to function. Many are beyond economical repair altogether. This is why increasingly outdated tanks have begun appearing at the front, not as museum pieces or propaganda stunts, but as operational necessity. The inventory that once gave Russia confidence is now a liability, because mass only matters if it can be sustained. And sustainability is where the system starts to crack, and tanks are only one part of the problem. If tanks are the symbol of Russian land power, artillery is the engine. For most of this war, Russia relied on volume, constant shelling, relentless fire, grinding pressure designed to wear down defenses through sheer weight. That approach consumes ammunition at an enormous rate. Russia can no longer support that rate alone. A significant portion of the artillery shells fired by Russian forces now come from outside the country, specifically from North Korea, an arrangement that would have been unthinkable before this war. This dependence matters for three reasons. First, it exposes the limits of Russian industrial capacity. Domestic production cannot meet consumption demands even after years of wartime prioritization. Second, it introduces reliability problems. Many of these imported shells are old, storage degraded, inconsistent in quality. Some fail outright. Others require additional inspection and handling that strains an already overloaded system. Third, it creates leverage. When your war effort depends on another state's willingness to keep supplying ammunition, you are no longer fully in control of your own escalation. Russia is not just fighting Ukraine anymore. It is managing supply relationships under pressure, and this dependence extends beyond artillery. Russia's aviation sector tells the same story from a different angle. Both civilian and military aircraft production have fallen far short of announced goals. Factories struggle with component shortages. Sanctions restrict access to critical systems. Skilled labor is disappearing through emigration, mobilization, and battlefield losses. Military aircraft are flying longer, harder, and more often than designed. Maintenance cycles are stretched. Airframes are aging faster than replacements can be produced. At the same time, Russia's air defense systems are being consumed by the war. Launchers destroyed, radars targeted, missiles expended faster than they can be replenished. The consequence is a trade-off Russia did not plan for. Defend the front or defend the homeland. Protect occupied territory or protect critical infrastructure. Pulling air defense systems from one region to cover another is not strength, it is rationing. And rationing is what happens when resources are finite. As 2026 settles in, Russia faces a reality it tried to avoid. Equipment losses are compounding. Production capacity is plateauing or declining. Reserves are thinning. And the hardest part is this: equipment problems can sometimes be solved with time. Manpower problems cannot. Equipment can be replaced slowly, people cannot. This is the point most surface-level discussions miss. Russia's greatest vulnerability heading into 2026 is not tanks, aircraft, or artillery. It is the human system required to operate them, and that system is bleeding out. Since the invasion began, Russia has suffered casualties on a scale not seen in Europe since the Second World War. Western estimates vary, but even conservative assessments place total killed and wounded well into the high hundreds of thousands. Higher-end estimates push past 1 million. What matters is not the exact number. What matters is who those losses represent. They are overwhelmingly young men, working-age men, men who should be forming families, building careers, paying taxes, and sustaining the economy that funds the state. Instead, they are gone. Dead, disabled, or psychologically broken. Russia can mobilize more people, it can force contracts, it can coerce participation, but it cannot replace a generation once it has been burned. And Russia entered this war already demographically fragile. For decades, the country struggled with low birth rates. Fertility fell sharply after the collapse of the Soviet Union and never truly recovered. Even in the best years, Russia remained below replacement level. That meant fewer young men entering adulthood even before the war began. Now layer a high-intensity, prolonged conflict on top of that reality. The result is not just a manpower shortage, it is a structural demographic wound. Entire cohorts are missing, others are damaged beyond recovery. And unlike equipment, this deficit compounds over time rather than stabilizing. Every year the war continues, the hole grows deeper. Russia's response to this problem reveals how serious it has become. Early in the war, recruitment relied on incentives, high bonuses, promises of pay, limited contracts. That phase has passed. Now recruitment is increasingly coercive. Here's the uncomfortable part. In a long war, recruitment doesn't just get harder, it gets uglier. Because once incentives stop working, the state starts borrowing manpower from places it can't control. Prisons were emptied, not gradually, not selectively, systematically. Convicted criminals were offered pardons in exchange for service. Many were rushed through minimal training and sent straight into frontline roles with some of the highest casualty rates of the war. This was not about reform. It was not about reintegration. It was about numbers, bodies to fill gaps that regular recruitment could no longer close. Some of those men survived, and those survivors did not return to Russian society as civilians untouched by war. They returned carrying combat experience, unresolved trauma, and in many cases, legal immunity connected to their service. That is not a sustainable manpower policy. It is a stopgap. And stopgaps, by definition, are temporary. As losses continued to mount, even this pool began to dry up. The state exhausted one of the last manpower sources it could pressure without triggering broader backlash. At the same time, the incentives meant to attract volunteers weakened instead of growing. Regional recruitment bonuses were cut rather than expanded. Contract signups fell sharply compared to earlier periods. The state began offering less money precisely when it needed more people. That combination matters. Because when a government needs manpower desperately but can no longer afford to pay for it, the stress is no longer theoretical. It is structural. This is what financial strain intersecting with manpower exhaustion looks like in real time. The pressure showed up elsewhere. Russia announced plans to expand its officer training pipeline. New academies were publicized. New programs were promised. On paper, it looked like reform. In practice, most of it never materialized. Not because the plans were badly written, but because training systems don't run on announcements. They run on instructors, on institutional memory, on time. Training institutions need experienced officers to teach. Experienced officers require years of service. Leadership pipelines take long periods to mature. Time is the one resource this war does not return. At the exact moment Russia needed more trained leadership, it faced the opposite. Shortages of instructors, shortages of capacity, and a recruiting base that was shrinking while becoming more expensive to draw from. And then there is the ripple effect most discussions barely touch. This war is not only consuming soldiers at the front, it is consuming the people who keep the military functioning behind it. Engineers, technicians, skilled industrial workers. The people who don't appear in combat footage but determine whether vehicles get repaired, whether artillery gets produced, whether damaged systems ever return to the battlefield. Some fled the country, some were mobilized, some were killed, others burned out of a system that could not replace them fast enough. A modern military is not just men in trenches. It is maintenance schedules, production lines, logistics planning, trained labor holding the entire structure together. When those roles are hollowed out, frontline capability erodes even if bodies keep arriving. This is why the manpower crisis is more dangerous than equipment loss. Equipment can sometimes be rebuilt, refurbished, or imported. A trained human system takes years to regenerate, not weeks, not months. Beyond numbers, there is something harder to quantify. Morale, not battlefield bravery, not unit cohesion in a single firefight, but long-term psychological endurance. A state can survive high casualties if people believe those losses are leading somewhere, if sacrifices feel purposeful, if cost translates into progress. Russia is losing people without achieving decisive results. Despite staggering casualties, Russian forces have struggled to secure major politically decisive cities. Offensive operations grind forward slowly at enormous cost. Entire months pass with minimal strategic change. That erodes belief, not in one dramatic collapse, but in thousands of small moments. Families absorb repeated losses. Regions endure repeated recruitment drives. Elites watch outcomes fail to match the cost being paid. A war of attrition only works if the opponent collapses first. Ukraine has not. And that reality feeds backward into the system. It makes recruitment harder, discipline more fragile. Every additional wave of mobilization feel less like a strategy and more like a bill coming due. A military can absorb casualties. It cannot absorb futility indefinitely. Russia's still fighting. That fact alone confuses people. Missiles are still launching. Factories are still producing. Oil is still flowing. So the assumption follows. If the war machine is still moving, it must still be sustainable. That assumption is wrong. What Russia is doing now is not sustaining a war. It is digesting itself to keep the war alive. And digestion always ends. There has been no single crash, no sudden implosion, no cinematic moment where everything stops. What is happening instead is more dangerous. The economy is being distorted so severely around wartime priorities that it is losing the ability to function normally. Defense spending has ballooned to historic levels. A massive share of state revenue is being rerouted into weapons production, troop pay, casualty compensation, and internal security. That money is not creating growth. It is not building resilience. It is not improving productivity. It is being burned. Factories that once produced export goods now churn out equipment that is destroyed within weeks. Labor that once generated civilian value is pulled into military production or sent to the front. Capital that once stabilized the economy is redirected into short-term survival. This is not war mobilization, it is economic cannibalism, and the bill is coming due. None of these pressures are new on their own. What makes 2026 dangerous is convergence. Equipment strain intersects manpower strain. Manpower strain intersects industry strain. Industry strain intersects financial strain. Financial strain intersects political control. Russia can continue fighting into 2026. That is not the question. The question is what breaks first when it does. Does the state reduce military ambition and accept strategic defeat? Does it escalate mobilization and risk internal instability? Or does it continue draining itself and hope something breaks elsewhere? Every option carries cost. None offer relief. This is the difference between endurance and exhaustion. Russia is no longer managing strain, it is accumulating it. This is where most people misunderstand the war. They look for a finish line, a collapse, a flag coming down. That's not how this ends. Wars like this don't snap, they deform. Russia can still attack, it can still mobilize. It can still absorb punishment. What it cannot do anymore is reset. Every month costs more than the last. Every replacement is less capable. Every workaround creates a new weakness. That is not defeat on the map. That is defeat in the math. People see missiles flying and assume strength. They see territory held and assume control. They see mobilization and assume endurance. But endurance isn't about how long you can keep moving. It's about whether movement is still taking you somewhere. By 2026, Russia's war effort increasingly exists just to sustain itself. Not to win, not to expand, not to impose terms, just to avoid stopping. And that is the trap, because the moment a state fights primarily to avoid collapse, it has already lost strategic freedom. There is no clean exit, no decisive surge, no recovery phase waiting on the other side, only higher costs for smaller gains. Ukraine does not need Russia to collapse spectacularly. It only needs Russia to keep going. Because every year this war continues, the balance shifts further away from Moscow and never fully returns. That's why this war doesn't end with one dramatic moment. It ends when the future is being spent faster than it can be replaced, not with silence on the battlefield, but with a state that still has weapons and no good choices left. That's what everyone misses. Russia doesn't lose tomorrow, it loses the future first, and once that's gone, the ending is only a matter of time.